You're not overwhelmed because you're weak. You're overwhelmed because you keep saying yes to things God never told you to carry. You say yes to avoid the conflict. You say yes to keep the peace. You say yes because you feel guilty when you don't. But every time you say yes to the wrong thing, you're saying no to something sacred, your rest, your clarity, and your calling. In Matthew 5:37, it says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Now, if you're new to this channel, this isn't just a book summary. We break down best-selling ideas and we connect them to God's word so you can grow in both knowledge and in your faith. And today we're diving deep into The Power of Saying No by Vanessa Patrick. In this book, Vanessa Patrick introduces one powerful idea: empowered refusal. It's not about being rude. It's about saying no with strength, clarity, and peace because you already know what matters most. This isn't just about time management. It's about identity and boundaries. Vanessa Patrick breaks down the psychology of why we say yes when we mean no, and then gives you the tools to stop. You'll learn why guilt and fear manipulate your calendar, how to stop over-explaining your no, and how to build what she calls a personal policy, principle that anchors your decisions in clarity, not pressure. And from a biblical lens, this is about something deeper. Saying no is a form of obedience. It's how you protect what God actually called you to say yes to. Now we're going to talk about why we say yes when we know we shouldn't say yes, and how guilt, pressure, and people-pleasing trap us in false responsibility. Because let's be real, most of your bad yeses don't come from your calendar. They come from your emotions. You say yes because you don't want to disappoint someone. You're afraid of seeming selfish. You feel like it's your job to hold everything together. Vanessa Patrick calls this the reluctant yes. It's the kind of yes that feels wrong even as you say it, but you say it anyway because it's easier than dealing with the fallout of a no. And the worst part, you often regret it, but you keep doing it. In The Power of Saying No, Patrick explains that guilt, fear, and pressure are internal pop-ups. Guilt says they'll think you don't care. Fear says, what if this costs you the relationship? And pressure says, good people say yes. But here's the truth. Good people say no, faithful people say no, and Jesus said no. Paul asked the Galatians straight up in Galatians 1:10, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? If I was still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. People-pleasing is often disguised as kindness, but when it replaces God's leading with someone else's expectations, it becomes idolatry, and your yes becomes a form of bondage. Remember, you're not here to keep everyone happy. You're here to obey God. Saying yes out of guilt may feel like grace, but it's really fear wearing a mask. If the yes isn't aligned with your calling, it's a distraction. So now we're going to flip the script, and we're going to learn what Vanessa Patrick calls empowered refusal, a way to say no that's strong, clear, and full of peace. But before we jump into that, I want to tell you about a free resource called the 12 Laws of Faith-Driven Success. It's a quick download guide that gives you the top biblical principles found in nearly every best-selling leadership book and success book that we cover. It's rooted in scripture and designed for people who want to build something that actually lasts. No matter what your goal or your idea you're striving for, this guide will give you clarity and traction. If you want a copy of this thing, just go to Zolane.com/12laws or hit the link in the description. It's totally free. It's called the 12 Laws of Faith-Driven Success to help you lead, grow, and live on purpose. Now let's get back to the book. So one of the most powerful phrases in this entire book is the empowered refusal. This isn't the hesitant, awkward, I'm sorry, but kind of no. It's not laced with guilt, over-explaining, or emotional rescue. Empowered refusal is a no that's rooted in values, not emotions. It's grounded, clear, non-negotiable. Instead of reacting out of guilt or pressure, you calmly respond from a place of internal clarity because you already know your answer before they even ask. Most people try to justify their no. I'm really sorry, but I wish I could, but I'm too busy. I feel bad, but that kind of language invites negotiation. Empowered refusal removes the emotional charge and replaces it with a confident, value-based stance. Here's an example. I don't take meetings during my family hours. I don't loan money to friends. That's a personal policy. Or this one that my wife always tells me. I don't commit to new projects without a 24-hour prayer window. It's not harsh, it's clean, peaceful, and strong. Jesus modeled this kind of boundary setting when he said in Matthew 5:37, let your yes be yes and your no be no. He wasn't inviting emotional gymnastics. He was calling for clarity and spiritual authority in how we speak. Empowered refusal is kingdom-aligned communication. It lets it when you say no, it carries peace, and your yes will carry purpose. You don't need to justify your obedience. You don't need to explain your no when it's rooted in who you are and who God called you to be. Empowered refusal is a declaration of clarity, not an apology for having boundaries. And as a business coach, I talk to my clients all the time about this. We talk about how what you say no to will open you up for opportunities you can now say yes to, but it's the right opportunities. You don't just say yes to everything, you say no to the wrong things, so that opens up the yeses. And half the time management is all about what you say no to and what you allow into your calendar. So now we're going to talk about how to build personal policies, the simple filters that protect your yes and give your no more strength. When you have clarity, it kills guilt. When you have policies, it kills the pressure. One of the most powerful tools in the power of saying no is the concept of a personal policy. Vanessa Patrick defines it like this. A personal policy is a pre-decided rule based on your values, one that removes the need for case-by-case decision-making. It's a line you've drawn ahead of time in the sand. So when the ask shows up, your answer is already clear. You're not scrambling for an excuse. You're not weighed down by guilt. You're simply living by design, not by default. When you don't have a personal policy, every decision feels heavy. Should I really help with this thing I don't have time for? Should I say yes just this once? I don't really want to disappoint them. But a personal policy flips that. Instead of wrestling every time, you respond with peace. I don't commit to evening events on the weekdays. I don't take phone calls during family time. I don't agree to anything without 24 hours to pray about it. These aren't excuses, they're boundaries backed by conviction. And as a Christian, we believe these things wholeheartedly. A lot of times we'll know ahead of time what we're going to say no to. You're backed by your conviction, your belief in what God has rooted you to become, right? That's who you are. It's a personal conviction that I no longer live that lifestyle. Psalms 119:106 says, I have taken an oath and confirmed it, that I will follow your righteous laws. In other words, I've pre-decided my direction. A personal policy is a spiritual filter. It's not about being rigid, it's about being anchored in what you truly believe. When you build your yes and no on prayer, values, and discernment, you stop being reactive and you start being responsible. You don't need to wait till you're overwhelmed to set a boundary. Decide right now so you don't compromise later. Personal policy is how you say no with peace, because your yes always belongs to what matters most. Even Jesus said no. It was always aligned with his mission. So let's look at the spiritual model of the boundaries from the life of Christ. If anybody had important things to do, it was Jesus. He had a very tight schedule. He wasn't serving his mission for very long. He healed the sick, he cast out demons, he fed multitudes, trained disciples, preached the kingdom, and ultimately died for humanity. But even with all of that on his plate, Jesus still said no repeatedly. Why? Because he knew his mission. And when you're clear on your mission, it becomes much easier to say no to anything that doesn't serve your mission. Here's an example. In Mark 1:38, after healing crowds late into the night, Jesus got up early to pray. The disciples found him and they said, hey, everyone's looking for you. Translation was, they want more from you. Come back and let's keep going. But Jesus replied in Mark 1:38, let us go somewhere else, to the nearby villages, so I can preach there also. That is why I have come. He didn't let popularity, demand, or pressure dictate his direction. He said no, not because he didn't care, but because he knew his purpose, and his purpose was the next village. Jesus regularly walked away from the crowds to be alone. In Luke 5:16, Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Matthew 14:23, after he had dismissed them, he went up to the mountains by himself to pray. That's not avoidance, that's alignment with God. He didn't just rest to recharge, he rested to stay connected to the Father. In John 7, Jesus' brother pushed him to go perform publicly, but Jesus said to him, John 7:6, my time has not yet come. He refused pressure to move on someone else's schedule. He followed heaven's schedule. If Jesus with eternal purpose and perfect love could say no without guilt, so can you. Not from arrogance, not from selfishness, but with alignment of your goals and your purpose. You don't need to say yes to everyone to walk in love with them. Sometimes the most Christ-like thing you can do is say no, because I've already said yes to something much, much greater. Jesus never said yes to distraction, and neither should you. So let's land on this. You say yes to too much. Not because you're weak, but because you're trying to be everything for everyone. But saying yes out of guilt is still disobedience. Empowered refusal gives you permission to say no without shame. Personal policies give your no structure. And even Jesus, the most loving man in history, said no to protect his mission. You don't need to apologize for having boundaries. You just need to build them with clarity and conviction. Galatians 1:10, am I trying to please people or God? So saying no isn't selfish. It's how you protect your God-given yes and steward the time, peace, and purpose he placed into your hands. Whether that's something you're striving for at work, a personal goal you set, something you've committed to your family, no matter what it is, do it in a way that's going to serve God and that's going to serve your mission and not someone else's. Now, if you want to dive deeper into Vanessa Patrick's The Power of Saying No, I'll link it below for Amazon and Audible. It's a clean, practical read that sharpens your mindset and frees up your life. And also, don't forget to grab a copy of the 12 Laws of Faith-Driven Success. It's the biblical version of everything these top business books are pointing you towards. If you want traction, peace, and clarity, get it now at Zolane.com/12 laws. Now remember, you're not here to keep everyone happy. You're here to obey God. So go ahead, say no, and walk in peace. And always remember, God did not create you to be average. So take that first step today.